Welcome everybody to Pink Ink Designs video tutorial on how to draw with lead pencils. I am actually going to use our African Queen stamp to be the base image of our pencil drawing, and I'm going to be showing you all sorts of different techniques of how to use the pencils, be it a very soft pencil or a harder pencil, and pencils in between. But before we get to that stage, I want to just stamp up my journal with the African Queen, one of my favourite stamp sets of Pink Ink Designs so far. She's just so beautiful. And then from the stamping, we're going to then do the pencil drawing. So while I do my arrangement, we'll fast forward that so you don't see all the boring part, and then we'll slow up the pencil part with all the technical information that I hope you'll find really helpful. So bear with while I just get stamping. Okay, right, we're finished with the stamping. The reason I put some paper under there was just so that when my journal is open, it tries, I attempt to try and get this the same level as this side, so it's easier to stamp. Of course, we don't need that now, so that can be removed. Now, lead pencils, you can use any make you like. It doesn't matter whether it's, expensive ones or cheap ones from your supermarket. But when you start, a good idea is to have 2 or 3 or 4, ideally, pencils of different grades. And when I say grades of softness. Now, the reason I say this is because we want to get some light shading and dark shading in our illustration. I mean, this stamping, although it be black, of course you could do it colour, but we're just using grey pencils because I think the effect can be so beautiful. You could, once you get the technique, obviously add coloured pencils, but for now we're going to start with our softest pencil, which is a 4B. The next one down, I think, is an HB. Then we've got an H and, 3H and an H. So let's get this in the right order. So 4B, B indicates the softness. So in this case, 4B is the softest one and has the most graphite in it. And so it will carry on. It will go 5B, 6B, 7B, and I think it goes to 9B. 9B being pure graphite. And is really, really soft, and you can smudge with it and make all sorts of lovely markings. HB is my sort of middle of the road one. That's the one you can kind of use pretty well for anything that you're doing. H is not too dissimilar from HB, so if anything we could afford to perhaps remove that one. And 3H is a harder one, so less graphite in there, and I think they mix it with clay if I remember rightly, and then that will go 3H, 4H, 5H, and so on. And the higher the number, so 6H for example, is going to be really hard and is used for probably things like technical drawing, and let's start with the HB, and would, when you put your markings down, you can put them down and leave them down. It's almost a bit like a plotter. It will plot what's going to go where. So in this case, 3H, I'm going to just plot where I want my illustration. Now, what I would have done before I started this, if I was going to do a more complicated drawing, is I'd done a little bit of research about Africa, and I would have sort of had some idea of maybe what a scene would look like in Africa. So I might put a background in and maybe a tree, or suggest some sort of animal. But I'm going to, I think, I kind of make it up as I go along. I think I'm going to try and keep this one as simple as possible. And I've just realised I've had a little hair on here, which got stuck to the stamp and has marked, which is a real shame, but you won't notice it because I'm going to colour that with lead and it will disappear. And the one thing that we are going to be absent of, and I'd like you to get used to, is not using a rubber. So starting with our 3H, I just want to plot in, and so we will give her a little bit of a background. Now, if you notice when I'm holding my pencil, I don't hold it like that as though I'm writing a letter and drawing like that. I hold it, I sometimes hold it with my hand the other way round, or as I'm going to write, but further up the shaft. You want your hand to be further up, and what that means is you get much more flow and movement with your drawing than if you were doing that. So it helps to just have a little practice. I mean, you could practice just on a offcut or something, just doing some strokes and the way you're holding your pencil. So you could just start with a little bit of shading. So this is quite hard. And you can use your finger to soften your shading. Let's just illustrate with the 4B the difference. And you can see immediately the difference. And again, soften. So just practice mark making. Again, I'm holding it further up the shaft than if I was writing. One also, so you can see what you're doing. Sometimes if you're doing that, you can't really see so well. So just practice your marks. And another good thing to practice is your basic shapes when drawing are things like circles, rectangles and oblongs. These are your primary shapes that you're going to be working with, because you put these together and they become, I mean, you can almost see here, this can become a person, a neck, shoulders. And what you do is you kind of plot in your shapes first, and then you kind of draw around, and it's by far the easiest way of drawing. Again, oblongs for the legs, and you can see how a form can be achieved just by these basic shapes. So that's how we start to draw things like people and animals, but for this one I'm going to keep it relatively simple. So let's plot in with our 3H, which is the hardest one, and I just want to put in a bit of a background so she's kind of grounded, she's not floating in midair. And I don't have a rubber, so these marks are all going to remain. I'm not going to get rid of them, but you'll find that once I start putting the 4B on, they'll disappear into the background. And also what I want to do is extend her body. Quite a lot of the time with Pink Ink Designs imagery, they kind of stop, but they leave a line there for you to continue if you want to. So we'll just put in her bit of her torso, and we'll have this arm sort of coming off like that. And, you know, if you make a mistake, you can see how many I've probably drawn about 20 lines there. We can then, with our harder pencil, if you put in the one line that you want to keep, it's the one line that you see, and you your eye sort of moves away from the ones behind. And by keeping them, it kind of, you keep that hand-drawn look, which is what I like so much. So she's going to be there, and she's going to be looking over at these feathers. Now, what we'll do is we'll suspend these feathers so it looks like they're coming from something. So we'll have them coming in from the top. Like that. Now, the best thing about the stamps is that they obviously have an acetate image on the back. If you're not sure about what imagery to use, copy what you see on here. So actually on this one, I've just also realised that my stamps weren't very clean, so I've made a bit of mark on there, but again that won't show once the lead's on. So I'm going to use this little stamp here to mimic, and we'll draw that in. So just keep it as reference, or look at the acetate sheet. So we're going to give this some sort of perspective. So we'll imagine that there's this tree, because it does to me, although it's really patterned, it does look a bit like a tree to me. So I'm just going to, again, you see we've got oblongs here, but I'm just tightening the points of them, and I'm just drawing in really, really lightly. So that if I say, right, I make a mistake here, I've done that too big, oops, I can then just go over and redraw. I'm going to leave that bit because it will be disguised. So I'm going to try and plot these in pretty quickly because I don't want this to be a long video. I'm going to do some longer videos with the drawing. I just want to do the bare basics so you don't get bored. And if you enjoy it, then we can perhaps go on to another one. So I've got some little decoration here. You can change the decoration up. Let's put some circles in just to be different. And this is where you make your piece of work your own. Okay, right, so I think we've pretty well plotted in what we want to go where. I mean, what I actually could do, I might just add just to scale up these, we'll just put the odd little feather. Again, just using the artwork as a guide as to, you know, what to do. As you get confident, you can go a bit off-piste and start doing a bit more of your own drawing. So anyway, we've got that in. So I basically, for that one, I've used a 3H. I haven't used the HB at all, but they are pretty similar. So we're going to go straight on to the 4B. Right, we don't need this little stamp anymore because that was just my reference. So what I'm going to do is going to start shading to get your tones. And you want to start light, and you build and build and build and build until it just gets darker and darker. So to throw her forward, what I want to do is to get some shade behind her head. And I'm going to have more shade behind her head than her body, because I still want it to look like there's a bit of a mid-ground, the mid-ground being what's here. So now can you see I'm now defining what I've pre-drawn with my plotter, my plan. I'm now going in heavier with my pencil. You can either use the point or you can use the side of your pencil. And you don't have to worry too much about seeing your strokes, because you can sort of feather them off with more lead over the top. I just love the profile of this lady. She's just beautiful. So there we are. We're going to have it darker here and fading up and fading out. So this is going to be my dark area, because this is the focal point. You want to maintain, sometimes you don't want the whole lot to be of the same value. It can look better just sort of one area being very, very intense and high contrast in tone, and then fade away, because then your eye is drawn to the main subject matter, which is our beautiful African Queen. Now what you can also do with a soft pencil is use your finger to fade away, which is quick and effective, very effective. And you can't do this technique with a harder pencil, so that's why you need your B pencils. So I'm just going to carry on adding my shade, and we'll fast forward again because I don't want to bore everybody and I don't want this to be too long a video. Okay, right, I've got some shading in. I would continue with this all the way through. Yeah, you can see where I've been shading with my fingers. You need to keep your hands as clean as possible, because sometimes you can make marks where you don't want them made. Right, now I'm going to go to the HB, which is again middle of the road. I'm going to start putting a bit of shading on her. I want her to be a bit more considered. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but it's just not so graphitey. It's a bit softer, a bit lighter, because it's a harder pencil. So I want to really get some definition in for her skin and hide this little mark that I've picked up with a hair that I've inked up. So by putting some shading in here, hopefully that will make it a little bit less obvious. Right, now when you're doing facial features, because we want to sort of bring out her eyes and her cheekbones, you have to sort of, the best thing to do is actually look at yourself in a mirror or look at somebody else and just sort of work out a basic form of anatomy, and where things go out and where things go in. So we know that her cheekbone will be here, so we need to put some shading beyond it to make it sit upright. So if this was her cheekbone there, I'm just going to put some really, really pale shading beyond it, and of course round the nose a bit of shading to indicate that part. There'll be a shadow under a nose, and there's generally a bit of shadow under your lip. And of course there'll be a highlight right on the bridge of her nose. So, I mean, there's only a tiny, tiny bit put in, but it just, with just that bit alone, it really shows a bit more form to her. I want these pearls or beads to, wouldn't be pearls, they would definitely be beads, to jump forward. So by putting a bit of shading behind, yeah, that is lovely. And then I'm just going to put a bit more in on her skin, soften it a little bit with my finger. So again, we can imagine that she's got to have some shading here. So you don't have to suggest very much, just a little bit, and it just gives you form. And the back of her arm will have shadow on it. Right, now I've got that basically in. I think that's as far as I'm actually going to show for the drawing. What I will do is I will sit down and just add more and more and more and more to this and show you the finished piece at the very end. But I think this just gives you the idea about shading. But beyond shading, as I said, with her arms and putting a torso in, you can also do that, use more detail to then sort of finish off. So in this case, what we would do, of course, being pink ink, we'd have to have more swirls. So add more detail. When you kind of think you're finished, just think, well, is there a little bit, can I add a little bit more somewhere else? If you're not sure, leave well alone. But if you have the courage, go off piste and start to play. And before I do finish off, there is just one thing I might just show you. Okay, one thing I will just show you. I said to you don't use a rubber, but the one time I do use a rubber, and it has to be quite, in fact I cut them down. Generally it should be a putty rubber. Well, we were taught it should be putty rubber, but actually I find these much better. I want to make a point out of a rubber, because I'm not rubbing out my, I don't want to rub out any line work I've put in, but what I do want to do is where I've smudged with my finger and I want to put in the highlight, I can put it in with my rubber. So, for example, always make sure the end of your rubber is clean too. If you're not sure, just rub it on a piece of clothing first, get rid of the dirt, and then we'll just get a little, let's get a brush, a bigger brush, I think. This one. Right, so you get your brush and then just brush off lightly any rubbings that you do, so you're not damaging your drawing. So I just want to put in the highlights here so that they really are light. So again, on her cheek, if there's any grey that's gone over her cheek that you didn't want there, you can pop it back in afterwards. And same with this horizon. Just want to clean it up a little bit. But don't get into the habit of always rubbing out your line work. I think that's what really shows a really lovely drawing, because you can see that somebody's hand done it. So I'll leave that for now and I'll come back at the end when it's all done. So I think you can see that, I think perhaps with the pencil it's almost done. I mean, I want to perhaps put a bit of detail on her. Let's do that now. I want to put some detail on her dress. And all I'm going to do is I'm just picking up some of the pattern that's on the jewellery. So you can copy that, or again go off piece and do what you fancy. A pencil drawing, for me, it's as far as I can take it. So we could perhaps just leave it as it is, or what we can do is then start adding some colour on top. Now, it doesn't matter which way round you want to do it. You could actually do the colour work first and then the pencil work on the top, or do it the opposite way round. I think actually historically I tend to do the backgrounds with a bit of colour first, and then, for example, let's look at, I mean, for example, this one, that's got a little bit of pencil work on. I've done the background first, same with that one. The colour went on first and then I went with pencil afterwards. We've got a few more in here which are quite interesting to see. Again, I think I stamped her first, then I put the colour in, then I did the lead work. But it really doesn't matter. But if we wanted to add a bit of colour, and I think I will just show a little bit, so you can see what we'll do. Well, I'm using Pink Ink multi-surface paint, which is just brilliant for doing watercolour painting. It's great for fabrics, any porous surface. It's brilliant on. You can dilute it right down to be like a watercolour. So I think we'll work on the feathers. Just want to add a little tiny bit of colour interest. So for me, I think I'm about done. It's sometimes it's very difficult to know when to stop, and you just get carried away and keep going. But there's no harm in that, as long as you're enjoying yourself. It doesn't really matter. Now, if you want to go to the Pink Inkers Facebook page, if you're not a member, just ask to join and we'll let you join. But if you want to do that, you can see loads and loads of really inspirational work by some of the members. They really are a talented lot. Or just join our normal Facebook page, or go to our website www.pinkinkdesigns.co.uk, and we've got a gallery there on every stamp design with loads of samples, and it's just really nice to see what the design team have created. So I think we're just about there. So I really hope you've gleaned a lot from this painting and enjoyed it, and hope it inspires you to have a go yourself. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.